Hello, students. Welcome to Mutual Fashion Academy. In this video, you'll be learning how to draft two dresses, a straight dress with a side cutout and a sleeveless A-line dress. By the end of this video, you'll be able to turn your flat fabric into "whoa, you made that" energy. So grab your pattern paper, your scissors, your tape, everything, and let's get drafting. This is the shoulder line. On the shoulder line, you mark the shoulder measurements divided by 2. You mark the same measurements on the armhole line and connect with a straight line. This is the armhole line. This is the bust line, the under bust line and waistline. Mark the bust span measurements on the under bust, waistline and bust line. Connect the 3 points with a straight line. On the under bust line, you mark half inch on the left hand side and 1 inch on the right hand side. Mark the same measurements on the waistline. I mark 1 inch below the bust line. That's where the dark lines will start from. Connect the dark lines like this. The neck width is 2.5 inches and the depth is 5 inches. On this part, you measure 2 inches from the shoulder line. You make sure this 2 inches is at least 1 inch below the 5 inches neck depth. Next, you connect the points like this from the neck width to the 2 inches and then to the 5 inches neck depth. So you have a curve on this part, not a straight line. You curve this part. Extend the dart line to the neckline. Mark half inch on the left hand side and connect it to the dart line like this. After that, you replace the half inch on the shoulder measurements so that there won't be shortage. Next, you mark the shoulder slant and connect it to the neck width. On this line, you find the midpoint. On that midpoint, you go in by half inch. Then make a curve like this. On the armhole line, you mark the bust circumference divided by 4 plus your seam allowance. Mark the same measurement on the bust line. On the under bust line, you mark the under bust circumference divided by 4 plus your dart and seam allowance. Do the same on the waistline. You connect the points. Make sure this part is curved. The line is curved, not sharp. Remember to add joining allowance to the shoulder. Cut. This is the back. I mistakenly deleted the drafting video, so I'm going to explain how to achieve this. I used 2.5 inches neck width and 1 inch neck depth. The shoulder slant is 1 inch. Then I added zipper allowance to the center front. On the waistline, I came in by half inch on the zipper allowance and I connected the line to the armhole line to prevent zipper bulge. The dart line started from the armhole line down to the waistline, unlike the front that started 1 inch below the bust line. You go ahead and cut. Moving on to the skirts. There should be seam allowance on the top for joining into the bodies. On the waistline, you mark the waist circumference divided by 4 plus your seam allowance. On the hip line, you mark the hip circumference divided by 4 plus your seam allowance. On the knee line, wherever you marked on the hip line, you subtract 1.5 inches from it and mark on the knee line. If you want the skirt to be fitted, you connect to the hem with a straight line. You can subtract up to 3 inches. If you want more fitting, After that, you cut. This is the back. You add the zipper allowance. Place the front pattern on the back like this. You trace and cut. Open the pattern. On the hip line, you come down by 3 inches. Then you make a curve to the hem like this. Place the front pattern on the back and cut both of them at the same time like this. You use this piece to trace any fabric you want to combine with the main fabric you're working with. When you're cutting it, you add allowance to this part. Add to this side too. On this center front, measure half inch downwards and connect the line like this. You cut it off. You do this only for the front pattern. After cutting to look like this. This is the front pattern. This is the back. This is the skirts for the back and the front. Moving on to the long sleeve. Your pattern should be on fold like this. This is the starting line. This is the elbow line. Measure from the shoulder to the elbow. Wrap the tape around your elbow like this. You make sure you bend your arm. The tape should move freely when you bend your arm like this. You decide how free or fitted you want it to be. On the elbow line, you mark the elbow measurements divided by 2 plus your sewing allowance. Then you mark the cap height. This is the cap height line. On the cap height, you mark the armhole measurements plus your sewing allowance. Then you make your curve like this. On the elbow line, you mark the elbow measurements divided by 2. And then you mark the round sleeve measurement divided by 2. You connect the point with a straight line. You curve this part slightly. The line shouldn't be straight. It should have a little curve. To differentiate the front and back armhole, you simply make an inner curve like this. Then you cut. I'm cutting the inner one, which will be for the front armhole. We've come to the end of this pattern drafting. If you have questions, leave them in the comment section. Let's move on to the next pattern. This is the starting line, which is also the shoulder line. This is the armhole line, the bust line, the under bust, and the waist line. On the shoulder line, you mark the shoulder measurement divided by 2. Extend the line to the armhole line. Mark the bust span measurement on the waistline, under bust, and bust line. Connect with a straight line. The dart line starts 1 inch below the bust line. On the waistline, mark half inch on the left hand side and 1 inch on the right hand side. Do the same on the under bust. Connect the dart lines like this. The dart measurement you use is dependent on the bust circumference you're working with. If you're sewing for a busty person, you take out the side darts on the bust line. The neck width is 3 inches and the depth is 3 inches for the front. You curve the neckline like this. The shoulder slant is 1 inch. Add half inch to this part, which will be the joining allowance. On the armhole line, you mark the bust circumference divided by 4 plus your seam allowance. Do the same on the bust line. On the under bust line, you mark the under bust circumference divided by 4 plus your dart and seam allowance. Do the same on the waistline. On the armhole line, find the midpoint. On that midpoint, measure half inch inwards. Curve the armhole like this. This is for the front. Use a ruler to connect the points. Smoothing these curved parts. We are done with the front pattern. I'm going to go ahead and cut it. When I use this type of darts, I don't cut it. I just make a notch like this on my fabric, which will help me to trace the darts on the other side of the fabric. When I want to sew it, I fold my fabric like this and sew. The notches will help you to trace the darts on the other side. Cut. This is the front bodice. This is the back. This is the zipper allowance, the armhole line, the bust line, and the waistline. We don't need the under bust for this. The neck width is 3 inches and the depth is 1 inch. Mark the shoulder measurements and connect it to the armhole line with your ruler. Curve the neckline. The curve should start from the zipper allowance. The shoulder slant is 1 inch. Add your joining allowance. On the waistline, you mark the bust span measurements. The dart line should extend to the armhole line. Connect with your ruler. Mark half inch on both sides of the dart line and connect like this. On the armhole line, mark the bust circumference divided by 4 plus your seam allowance. Do the same bust line. On the waistline, you mark the waist circumference divided by 4 plus your darts and seam allowance. Connect the points. On this armhole line, you find the midpoint. From that midpoint, you make a curve like this. You see, there is a difference between the back and the front. The front curve went in by half inch. I'll notch that just like I did in the front. On the waistline, measure half inch inwards and connect the line to the armhole line. This will remove zipper bulge. After that, you mark the zip allowance again. We are done drafting the pattern. You go ahead and cut. Moving on to the skirts. This is the waistline, this is the hip line, the knee line, and the full length of the skirts. On the waistline, you mark the waist circumference divided by 4 plus your seam allowance. On the hip line, you mark no measurements. Then on the hemline, that is where you want the length to stop, you mark the hip circumference divided by 4 times 2. For instance, if the hip circumference you're working with is 40 inches, 40 divided by 4 is 10. On the full length of the skirt, you mark 20 inches. That is 10 times 2, 20 inches. If you want the A line to be fuller than that, you can multiply it by 3. You multiply the 10 by 3. That is 30 inches. After that, you collect from the waist to the full length. On this part, you measure 2 to 3 inches upwards, then make a curve like this. The reason is this part usually look longer than the middle, so we need it to be equal. If after cutting it and you feel it's still longer than the middle, you reduce it again with a curve. Go ahead and cut. I've added a zipper allowance. You place the front pattern on the back like this and trace. Ignore this part, please. So we have the front skirts and the back. This is the back bodies and this is the front bodies. Let me know if you found this tutorial helpful. Leave your questions in the comment section. I hope to see you in my next one. Have a good one. Bye.